From the standpoint of Orthodox Christianity, Jainism presents a deeply earnest attempt to understand the human condition, the problem of suffering, and the path toward spiritual liberation. Its ancient discipline, its profound emphasis on non-violence, and its intense focus on moral purification reveal a sincere religious pursuit. Yet, when examined through the lens of Orthodox theology, several fundamental divergences emerge, divergences that touch upon the nature of God, the human person, the meaning of salvation, and the shape of spiritual life itself. At the heart of Jainism is a radically non-theistic framework. The universe, in Jain teaching, has no creator, sustainer, or transcendent source. Reality is composed of eternal substances, souls, matter, time, space, motion, and rest, interacting according to impersonal laws. For Orthodox Christianity, this absence of a personal creator is not merely a theological difference but an entirely different vision of existence. Orthodoxy affirms that the human soul is not merely an eternal entity entangled in karmic matter but a created being, brought into existence through the loving will of a personal God. The relationship between creature and creator is foundational. Every act of prayer, every virtue, every step toward salvation is rooted in communion with the living God who reveals himself, enters history, and draws humanity toward himself. Jainism's understanding of salvation rests upon the total elimination of karmic material through rigorous ascetic discipline, fasting, non-violence, truthfulness, extreme restraint, and often severe bodily practices. While Orthodoxy deeply honors asceticism and self-denial, it sees the ultimate problem of humanity not as a physical substance of karma clinging to the soul but as a rupture of communion with God caused by sin. Salvation, in the Orthodox understanding, is not self-attained purification through technique but the restoration of relationships, first with God through His grace, then with others, and finally within one's own spiritual life. Even the greatest ascetic achievements in Orthodoxy are understood to be impossible without grace, which itself is the very life of God poured into the believer. In contrast, Jainism's path is entirely self-powered. Liberation is achieved through one's own effort, without divine assistance. This self-sufficient path stands in sharp contrast to the Orthodox proclamation that without me you can do nothing. The extreme non-violence that Jainism requires reflects a noble desire to minimize harm and cultivate compassion. Yet in its most absolute and literal form, avoiding harm even to microbes, refusing agriculture for fear of disturbing soil organisms, and in some sects renouncing all but the most minimal physical activity, Orthodoxy would see a misdirected application of moral concern. For the Orthodox, the purpose of the moral life is to restore the image of God within the human person and express divine love toward creation. But this love is grounded in wisdom. The human being is not meant to abandon participation in the world but to sanctify it. A moral framework that requires total withdrawal from normal human responsibilities risks undermining the very relational fabric of life, which Orthodoxy views as essential for spiritual growth. True love, in Christianity, is not merely avoidance of harm, it is active, self-giving participation in the life of others. Jain metaphysics also views the soul as pure but weighed down by karmic particles that bind it to the cycle of rebirth. Orthodox Christianity, by contrast, teaches that the human person is not trapped in an eternal cycle but created for a single life, followed by judgment, resurrection, and eternal communion. The notion of cyclical rebirth not only contradicts the Orthodox worldview but also diminishes the significance of history, embodiment, and the Incarnation. For Orthodoxy, the Incarnation of Christ, God entering the world, taking on flesh, living, dying, and rising again, reorients the entire meaning of the human story. Salvation is not escape from embodiment but the transfiguration of it. Finally, the ideal of the Jain liberated being, the Siddha, an isolated, disembodied soul dwelling eternally at the top of the cosmos, contrasts sharply with the Orthodox vision of theosis. In Orthodoxy, the ultimate destiny of humanity is union with God in an eternal communion of love, not solitary self-perfection. Salvation is not isolation but participation in divine life, shared with all the saints in glory. The Orthodox worldview sees personhood as inherently relational, reflecting the relational nature of God himself. Jain liberation, by contrast, emphasizes detachment from all relational ties as the path to freedom. In summary, from the Orthodox Christian perspective, Jainism represents a serious moral and ascetical tradition, but one that lacks the essential foundations of Christian spiritual life: a personal God, the necessity of divine grace, the sanctity of embodied existence, and the relational nature of salvation. Its admirable discipline and moral earnestness cannot compensate for what Orthodoxy sees as the central absence: the living God who creates, loves, reveals himself, and invites humanity into eternal communion with him.